MEFA Podcast. I'm Jonathan Hughes.
And I'm Julie Shields-Rutyna.
Today we're going to be hearing from Nick Charrette, who is an Associate Director at Veterans Upward Bound, based out of Boston. And he will talk to us about education's benefits for veterans. Julie, you hosted Nick on a webinar on this very topic a few weeks ago.
Yes, and I really enjoyed talking with him as well. There are so many pieces and so many programs available for veterans. It was great to have his expertise.
Yeah, it's always an area of financial aid or college financing that, let's just say I'm always glad to have expert assistance on those programs. And of course, we're recording this in the beginning of November, and hopefully it'll be out by Veterans Day. But if you are a veteran or have a veteran in your life that may want to go to college, you definitely want to stick around and hear that conversation because it was great and I learned a lot from it. But before that, Julie, for our first topic, I want to bring up another webinar that you hosted recently.
Yes, and it was with Dr. Clantha McCurdy from OSFA, which is the Office of Student Financial Assistance here in Massachusetts. And the topic was Massachusetts state financial aid. So that's aid that comes directly from the Commonwealth. And it was really great. We talk a lot about federal aid and institutional aid. And it's nice to also make sure that we keep people informed that there is Massachusetts aid as well. So there are lots of state-based programs. And I think we're going to be able to hear from Clantha here about the various financial aid programs, and we'll get to know some of those shortly. But before we do, I just want you to hear something that Clantha said about the amount of financial aid that's available this year for students.
The information on our budgets this year, we have the largest financial aid budget in over 3 decades. In fact, we grew the financial aid budget by $20 million this year. And the other individual line accounts are also either level funded or receiving a little bit more money. In addition to that, we spend about $60 million in tuition waivers or tuition credits. So we have essentially a $200 million program right now. And with that, and the general scholarship, the $130 million program, that funds a number of our programs, including the Mass Grant, which remains the what I would call the flagship program, and it serves the largest number of students who demonstrate significant financial need.
All right, so that's good news.
It is good news. We always like to hear about funding and increased funding. She talked a lot about the Mass Grant. That's really the program that's most widely used. So should we hear from her talk about that here too?
Mass Grant, our largest financial aid program, serves about 45,000 students a year. And as I mentioned, a student has to file the FAFSA, be a Mass resident, and be eligible for Pell in order to qualify. I am happy to say that for this year, we received a significant increase in Mass Grant, and we were able to increase the max award by $400, going from $1,800 to $2,200 in 1 year. And that is significant because the majority of our students getting that maximum award are in the very low EFC cells. So there are more students in the 0 to 500 EFC cells getting Mass Grant than those above 501 and above. So we are helping students with a significant amount of aid this year.
I will also note quickly that OSFA has added to that a Mass Grant Plus. And that's an expansion of the Mass Grant program. It's a pilot program, but it's also very good news for students here in Massachusetts.
Mass Grant Plus, this is our pilot program. It's very new right now at community colleges and the 9 state universities. And it is purposed to address unmet need for direct costs of tuition fees and books. And the award is determined after all other aids are accounted for. $7.3 million available this year at community colleges. And then of course, 10 million at the state universities. And you could be full or part-time, but the institution must prioritize this to Pell eligible students. And here again, the part-time is at a minimum of at least 6 credits or more. We like to think of Mass Grant Plus as an extension of the Mass Grant program. And for that program, the deadline is November 1. So it allows the institutions a little bit more flexibility with who they can award that money to. And of course, the institution is in control of that.
We mentioned the Mass Grant and Mass Grant Plus now, and there are other programs that we'll discuss. What do you have to do to apply for these programs?
Yes. So I think sometimes families and students don't understand this, that the main financial aid form, the FAFSA, which students use to apply for federal financial aid, that's also what they use to apply for state aid, such as the Mass Grant. And if they're eligible, they'll receive that as part of their financial aid offer.
Is that the case with all Massachusetts state aid programs, that all you have to do is file the FAFSA and you'll be sort of run through for eligibility for any Massachusetts state aid program?
Well, that's such a great question. So for most state aid, yes, the FAFSA is the form that everyone needs to file, and make sure you file it on time. So I would say most state aid is from that. However, not all. We don't have time at this moment to go in depth on every single state program, but there are a few state aid programs that require some additional things. So for example, there's the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship, and that is awarded to the top 25% of grade 10 MCAS scorers in Massachusetts. And that is redeemable at public colleges and universities. So that helps cut the costs if a student is awarded that program. And then another program that you do have to specifically apply for with its own application is the Coplick Certificate of Mastery. So for example, let's hear Clantha talk about that one.
Coplick Certificate of Mastery, another waiver program. And as you know, students are invited to apply for that. That selection process is handled strictly by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, but the Department of Higher Ed simply facilitates the awarding or accrediting of the tuition waiver benefit to students once they enroll in a public college. And for this, the student has to complete the FAFSA annually and maintain a 3.3 GPA.
So now, even for some of the programs which you need to qualify or apply separately, you still have to complete that FAFSA. So even, I'll just mention where that John and Abigail Adams Scholarship is a merit-based scholarship. But for processing and to make sure that goes through, students do need to file a FAFSA. So, that goes along with the talk that we have, Jonathan, all the time. Students, file your FAFSA because it will put you in the way of eligibility for so many programs. And make sure you do it before May 1st of the year before you're planning to be a student, because that is the state financial aid deadline. So I should also highlight two more programs. One is the foster child grant. We sometimes get questions on what is available for those in foster care or children who are adopted. And another one is the Department of Children and Families Adopted Child Tuition Waiver and Fee Assistance Program. So why don't we hear directly from Clantha about those programs as well?
Foster child grant, just a reminder that this is a program for students who continue to be served by the Department of Children and Families. They are eligible for a $6,000 grant on this program. And the foster child grant is completely portable. So a student can attend a college in Massachusetts or anywhere in the USA for that matter. And we are serving about 300 students a year on this program. The sister program to the foster child grant is the Adopted and Foster Fee Assistance, but only available to students who attend public institutions. And this is a full tuition and fee scholarship, but it's a wonderful program that the state has heavily invested in now. Early on, we didn't have enough money to pay the full cost of tuition and fees for both semesters, but now that is funding is available, and we are supporting about 900 students each year. So as you can see, we have $7.4 million on this program. Student has to provide proof of their eligibility to the school, which they get from the Department of Children and Families. And then once they're in our system as being eligible, that remains. They never have to provide the proof any longer, and we can pre-package them, or the school can pre-package them and then just submit to our office certification of their eligibility. So it's a wonderful program.
All right. Well, that is a lot. There are frankly more programs that are given out by the state than I was aware of. And I'll put a link to the webinar in the show notes. So where if people are interested, they can go and get a sort of more expansive look at everything that's available. And even that's not everything.
It's so true. So true. There's so much there. And the other state program that I like to talk about is the MassTransfer program. And so we've talked about that before, I think even on this podcast, but basically that's the program where students can get an education here in Massachusetts by beginning at a community college, a 2-year institution, and then transferring to a 4-year university. And by going through that MassTransfer program, there are all kinds of ways that they can reduce costs. There are tuition freezes and tuition credits. So on that state OSFA website, they can find out good information about the MassTransfer program as well. So once again, just file your FAFSA to be eligible for a lot of these programs.
And for those programs that may require additional steps,
students can go to the OSFA website, and that will list all of those scholarships and the forms that are needed for those. Another place is to talk to their school counselors if they're interested in those programs, because some of those require a school counselor support.
All right. Well, I will once again put a link to the webinar in the show notes so that people can access that and take a look at that information. Now we head to the MEFA mailbag, and these are questions that have come into us from customers over the past 2 weeks and answered by our college guidance experts. If you have any questions, remember you can please reach out to us at collegeplanning@mefa.org, or you can call us at 1-800-449-MEFA, or you can reach us on social media on Facebook at /MEFA-MA, and at Twitter at @MEFA-tweets, and Instagram at @MEFA_MA. And so today we have an international student question, and this person writes to us, who is a US citizen, says, but my parents are from Nepal. They do not file US taxes, but they do file Nepali taxes. So I'm planning on applying to UC Berkeley, Cornell, and the University of San Francisco through the CSS profile. Where should I send my forms? Julie?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot in this question. So John, you can join in too. I guess the first thing I would say is, as a US citizen, Celine, you are eligible to apply for all financial aid. And so that means you should file a FAFSA as well. And the way you file a FAFSA, if your parents are not US citizens, is that they can just put zeros in the Social Security question, and then they can transfer their income to US dollars and then complete the form that way. And they will have to print the signature page and manually sign it and mail it into the FAFSA. So that's one thing. But then, yes, the colleges that you're referencing who will need the CSS profile form, you'll also want to complete the CSS profile form, and you'll want to do the same thing. You want to have your parents, do that, translate their income into and assets into US dollars and put that information on the form. The last thing I will say is that some colleges who require the CSS profile may use some additional forms for international students. So you should check with the colleges and see if there are any special forms that could be used for, because your parents live elsewhere and have international income and all that. Just double check in case there are some additional forms that you could use. Anything else you can think of, John?
No, I was about to say, I don't think I can add anything to that. So I hope that helps. And remember, if you have any questions, you can call us up at 1-800-449-MEFA or email us at collegeplanning@mefa.org. We have a bench of college guidance experts waiting to answer your call. Now let's go to my talk with Assistant Director of Veterans Upward Bound, Nick Charrette. Nick Charrette is an Associate Director at Veterans Upward Bound based out of Suffolk University in Boston. He's an Army veteran and holds a bachelor's degree in history and spent his years in the Army as a military police officer. He's also an active member of the student veteran organization on campus. Nicholas, how are you?
Not too bad, Jonathan. How are you doing today?
Good. And can you tell me first about your organization? Mm-hmm. Can you tell me all the services that Veterans Upward Bound can offer and to whom?
For sure. So Veterans Upward Bound is a Department of Education grant. So we are not the only one. There's about 60 of them around the country. They're not really evenly spread out. Some states have more just because they have a higher concentration of veterans. But currently we're the only one in Massachusetts. And essentially, the program is designed to really motivate and assist vets in making sure that they develop those academic and other skills that are going to be necessary, not only for acceptance in a post-secondary education program, but sustained success. And the services that we offer are academic counseling, refresher and remedial courses. And when we talk about refresher and remedial, I really like to zero in on math and English, just because we gear the curriculum of these courses towards the AccuPlacer. So if you're looking to enter a community college or UMass or state school, it's what they're going to be testing you on. So we really gear the curriculum towards that. Additionally, we run periodic financial literacy workshops, VA education and state education benefits workshops or webinars, kind of like the one that we partnered with MEFA on. For some veterans, if maybe they're a little bit ahead of the course content that we offer, we can hire a tutor prior to them enrolling in school to help them maybe work on something that they're deficient in. Additionally, we help veterans with college applications and other related items that are going to be needed for acceptance. So completing that FAFSA, making sure that you get your transcripts from your past schools, the joint service transcript, which is huge for veterans, and anything else that goes hand in hand with applying to and being accepted into school. And all of our services are completely free to eligible veterans. We do aim to serve mostly low income veterans, those who are first generation college veterans, and those who are academically at risk. But as long as you don't have a dishonorable discharge and you already don't have a bachelor's degree, we can help you out.
And how do veterans actually find you?
Sure, yeah. So there's a few different ways you could find us. One of them would be to go on our website, which is vubma.com. So pretty much the Veterans Upward Bound, VUBMA for Mass.com. And we have a referral and application inquiries page on there, where you can just put your info in and we'll reach out. Additionally, you can find us on the Suffolk University website. And also, I don't know if it's possible, but I can, Jonathan, I can give you my email and phone number to put in the description of the podcast as well. I have no problem with anyone just, reaching out directly.
Yeah, we'll put all that information in the notes, and we'll link to the webinar that you did as well, because I think people would want to see that. So, watching that webinar, that's all about VA education benefits. You mentioned that confusion can prevent a lot of veterans from pursuing their education. And can you talk about why that may be and what
Sure.
can veterans do to overcome that confusion?
Yeah, for sure. I know that you had mentioned a minute ago that, even on your end, it can be kind of confusing. It doesn't, it's not just to those on the civilian side. Veterans get really confused by this stuff too. When veterans separate, the Department of Defense does have programs for transition. In the Army, it used to be called Soldier for Life. And then I believe they changed it to TAPS, which is the Transition Assistance Program. I forget what the S is for, but essentially they want to let you know what the VA can do for you for education, employment, and all this other stuff before you leave, so that, when you separate, you don't feel lost and you know where everything is. But kind of the problem with it sometimes is that while you're doing these classes, while you're still on active duty. and the mission comes first. So sometimes, someone's giving you all this great info in like a 1 hour, info session that you have to go to, and it's just overload. And also you're not really focused because it doesn't feel real yet. What makes it a little, even more confusing for people sometimes is that when vets separate, they may be eligible for 2 to 3 different benefits. And that alone is just, what do I use? Which one do I use? How do I apply for it? How do they work? They all pay tuition differently. Some of them have a books and supply stipend. Some of them pay a housing allowance. And some of them, kind of a mix of all of them. So it can get, really, confusing and overwhelming for vets. And, specifically for the GI Bill, which I'm sure we'll talk about a lot through this discussion, a lot of vets who are separating right now are eligible for 2 GI Bills. And once you use one, it's an irrevocable decision. You can't say, I used post 9/11 and want to go to Montgomery and vice versa. And this makes, making the right choice the first time around really, really important, because depending on your goals, where you live, if you're going to go full-time or part-time, and a bunch of other factors, one of them is always going to be better than the other. And, in order to, overcome this confusion, that is just inherent in, being a veteran trying to access your benefits, the biggest thing I could tell vets is do your research and try and meet with your local Veterans Upward Bound. Putting the numbers side by side and comparing them can really help make the decision a lot more clear. And additionally, Veterans Upward Bound is well versed in these, so we can help you for your personal situation kind of figure it out.
Can you tell us the difference between the 2 GI Bills? You mentioned Montgomery GI Bill and then 9/11 GI Bill.
Sure. I would preface, this whole answer to this question with, I'm going to try and just keep it high level.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of different aspects, different factors and elements that make each specific situation different. And I'll say it probably at the end of every answer I give is that your individual situation is individual to you. So make sure we do the research. But, back to the 2 different GI Bills. There are other GI Bills, but generally in 2021, when someone refers to the GI Bill, they're referring to either Chapter 30, which is the Montgomery GI Bill, and Chapter 33, which is the post 9/11 GI Bill. And again, for our purposes, and to stay out of the really super specific stuff and confusing people, we're just going to assume that the veterans that we're talking about in this situation are 100% eligible, just because there are other elements that take your eligibility level down and whatnot based on your time in service.
I have a quick question before you start on the Montgomery GI Bill. Is that the GI Bill, the sort of famous GI Bill that people talk about when the veterans came back from World War II and all, they took advantage of the GI Bill? Is that the Montgomery GI Bill? Or is
I believe so. Yeah, it's had a few amendments, but it's like the original GI Bill.
Okay.
And up until, if you put it in the historic, sense like that, up until recently, it has been the GI Bill. But post 9/11 GI Bill, obviously, since the war on terror and all that, has really changed the game a little bit. And we're going to kind of break down the key differences of them. So the main characteristics that really differentiate both from each other. For the Montgomery GI Bill, a veteran is eligible for it if they paid into this GI Bill in their initial entry training or basic training, whatever you want to call it for your branch. A lot of vets, when I'm talking to them, they don't remember if they did. They're like, oh, I don't remember. What does that payment look like? Usually what I can, get a veteran to remember if they did was one of your first days at boot camp. You're asked point blank, do you want to reduct your pay by $100 a month for 12 months for the GI Bill? And you either said yes or no. And that would make you eligible for the Montgomery GI Bill. The Montgomery GI Bill pays the veteran a stipend of just over $2,000 a month for every full month of training and education. I just want to point out the key word here is pays the veteran. The VA pays the veteran this month, every month that you're, in school. This is the only, payment that you get under the Montgomery GI Bill. There's nothing specifically for housing, books. It's just the Montgomery GI Bill stipend. With this stipend, the veteran has to pay the school their tuition and any other education-related fees, including books, supplies, or any other fees the school may tack on. If there is any left over after you've paid your tuition, it is for the veteran to use as needed. So, traditionally, veterans would use it for rent or any other living expenses that they incur while using their Montgomery GI Bill. So moving to the post 9/11, it's a little bit more involved. It's a little bit, I don't want to say complicated. There's just more to it than just here's your stipend, pay your tuition. For post 9/11 eligibility, it's pretty easy to remember. If you served after September 11th, 2001, you are eligible for, or you were, depending on, you know, if it's expired or not, but it granted you eligibility for this GI Bill. A big thing that attracts veterans to this GI Bill, and, you know, a massive upgrade over the Montgomery GI Bill, was that this GI Bill granted you a housing allowance. The way that this housing allowance is calculated is based on, it's pretty much similar to what BAH, or basic allowance for housing, is for active duty members. So any veterans listening, they remember getting BAH, it's pretty much the exact same thing, except it's paid out at the pay grade of E5 with dependents. So it doesn't matter if you separated as a private, an airman, a sergeant, or you were sergeant major of the Army. Every single person using this GI Bill is subject to the same pay grade. Additionally, veterans using this GI Bill are entitled to a book stipend of up to $1,000 per year. And the big thing that really differentiates it, besides that housing allowance, is that the tuition under the post 9/11 GI Bill is paid directly to the school. Mm-hmm. So if we remember Montgomery, the VA would pay me, the veteran, a stipend, and then I would pay tuition. Under post 9/11, once I'm certified with my school, the VA will pay the school the tuition. And as far as tuition goes, if you go to a public school, community college, state school, your tuition is fully covered. And if you go to a private school, they will pay you up to around $26,000 per year. One more thing about the post 9/11 GI Bill that really separates it from Montgomery is that if you are 100% eligible, as we said prior, you're entitled to potentially participate in the Yellow Ribbon program, which if you go to a private school, and let's say your school costs $40,000 per year, but as I just said, the post 9/11 GI Bill will only pay $26,000. It's a way to potentially help you fund that remaining $14,000 in tuition, where you know, your school and the VA enter a contract to help you eliminate that remaining tuition.
That's the Yellow Ribbon program.
Correct. And there is, again, it's this world of, you know, all these different programs and whatnot that kind of confuse people. With Yellow Ribbon, you cannot use it with Montgomery, but it can be used with post 9/11. Two more quick things I just want to say about the differences between them is that the Montgomery GI Bill is actually being phased out. So by 2030, it will no longer be used. And, you know, I know everything I just said was a mouthful and it's a lot, but I hope, you know, to just kind of pass on these key concepts of it. And then if any veterans, you know, want to understand the key differences between them as it pertains to them, you know, Veterans Upward Bound, it's a big part of what we do is helping you navigate these benefits.
Are there any examples when somebody would be perhaps it would be in their interest to use, you know, one or the other, Montgomery or 9/11 GI?
Absolutely. And, you know, generally, if we meet a veteran who wants to go to school full time and they live in an area with like high cost of living, the post 9/11 GI Bill is almost always going to beat out the Montgomery by virtue of your tuition's covered. Don't even worry about it. Mm-hmm. And you get this housing allowance that is more than enough to pay for rent, and because it's based on the cost of living in your zip code. There are some instances, you know, say a veteran wants to go to school part-time, specifically half-time or less. So generally at a college or university, 6 credits or less. Montgomery GI Bill sometimes is more beneficial to the veteran, because another aspect of the post 9/11 is once you go to school half-time or less, you don't get a housing allowance. So there's, you know, this new aspect to this cost analysis that we're kind of doing between the two, because yeah, under post 9/11, when I go to school half-time or less, my tuition is still paid, but I get no stipend or anything from the VA. Under Montgomery, I may still have money left over after I pay that tuition. So in that case, it may be better for me. And then additionally, in places that have a really, really, really low cost of living, Montgomery is sometimes better just because the housing allowance under post 9/11 may not really add up. So it is a really specific, you know, to your situation. What I will say is if you're a veteran in Massachusetts, 99% of the time, post 9/11 will be more beneficial to you.
Yeah, I can understand that. Um, there is another program that you mentioned in the webinar that I want to talk about, and that is the VRE program, which is, I think, Veterans Readiness and Employment.
Correct.
Okay, and can you talk about that and who would benefit from that program?
For sure. VRE is a program that's been around for a while. It was actually just rebranded by the VA. So if veterans listening or not familiar with it, it used to be called Voc Rehab up until sometime in 2020. So it's the same program. It's just got a rebranding. Essentially, what VRE, kind of their mission, it's to help transitioning service members and vets who have a service-connected disability and an employment handicap prepare for and obtain sustainable employment. VRE uses a few different ways to kind of achieve that, to help vets find that sustainable employment. One of them is the traditional college and university, but they can also approve you to go to like a trade school or into an apprenticeship. And then there's a few other ways that are really uncommon, so usually don't talk too much about them. Generally, we're seeing a veteran going to a college, university, trade school, apprenticeship. A big thing with VRE to keep in mind is that it is not an entitlement like the GI Bill is. With both GI Bills, if I'm entitled, I opted into Montgomery or I served after 9/11, I'm entitled to them. I can use them, like just by virtue of my service. VRE is different in the fact that you have to apply for it and be approved for it. And you have a counselor who kind of, is a part of your journey through that program as well. Another thing to keep in mind is that at its core, VRE is not an education program. It is an employment program. It's a very big distinction that the folks at VRE have, discussed with us because we work with the program a lot to help, collaborate and make sure that vets are, successful. But that's a huge distinction. It can fund your education, but it needs to be connected to sustainable employment. It's a really big, aspect of the program. There is some eligibility. Generally, you have to have a 20% service-connected disability through the VA or higher and an employment handicap. Although if you can have a 10% service-connected disability, but the employment handicap that you have has to be considered serious, so just a higher level of handicap. And additionally, there is a basic period of eligibility of 12 years from the day that you separated from the military, but that can be extended if, again, going back to that serious employment handicap.
Thank you so much for talking about those programs. Are there any other programs run either through the VA or maybe outside of the VA, but are open to veterans or those in the military community?
For sure. Often we run into veterans who, were never eligible for post 9/11 because maybe they separated in the late 90s. That also means their Montgomery GI Bill has expired and that they don't have a service-connected disability through the VA. So there's no VA programs that are available to them, at that time. What we usually do is explore the Massachusetts in-state tuition waiver for veterans. It's a great program and it does not expire. So as long as you have an honorable discharge, served over 180 days on active duty, and you're enrolled in 3 or more credits at a state school or community college, you can participate in this waiver. The process is a little bit different than the GI Bill or VRE. The way that you apply for it is actually through your school. Every school has a veteran rep and some other liaison, someone who's kind of the go-between between the state and the school, working on veterans benefits, so they can help you apply for this. It is just a tuition waiver. I don't want to say just because that's still huge, but keep in mind there's no housing allowance, other stipends, and if there's any fees, those are on you. But the tuition is completely waived, which is a huge benefit as well. Additionally, other non-VA programs, although it's generally further down our list, we do help veterans all apply for FAFSA. Generally, they're not taking out student loans by virtue of having some sort of VA education benefit or that Mass and state tuition waiver, but we do help them due to the other benefits associated with FAFSA. And we also help veterans explore a plethora of scholarships that we have kind of compiled.
What are some of the most common questions or difficulties that veterans have with the FAFSA process and financial aid in general?
I think that the two biggest things that pertain to veterans in FAFSA is the first part is that they don't apply because they don't think that there's any benefit. If I have 100% GI Bill, I don't need FAFSA. And so they don't understand the other benefits of it. And two is there's actually a specific part of FAFSA. There's a specific box in it as a part of the application that specifically pertains to veterans and really trips a lot of people up. So on that first part about veterans not even applying, veterans often say, well, I have my tuition paid. I even have yellow ribbon. I don't need student loans. And we like to, let veterans know that, there's other benefits of applying for FAFSA, depending on, your taxable income and your family size and all that. You may be deemed eligible for grants, typically, Pell grants that, can really help veterans with living expenses during the off months. Let's think about that traditional, course load, fall and spring. That's, adds up to give or take 8 months. If a veteran is planning on living off of their GI Bill, like for example, let's use a veteran going to school in Boston full-time. They would be entitled to just over $3,000 a month in housing allowance for every full month they're in school. So in your head, you think, oh, that's 12 months. That's like $36,000. I could probably, make that last the year. But when you factor in the school break in the winter and not going to school in the summer, that situation changes a lot. So, we tell veterans you could be eligible, depending on, your income and whatnot, for Pell Grants that in those months you're not in school can really help you, close the gap. And additionally, just help you, financially and keep you secure so that you're focusing on school and not worrying about, where is, my utilities bill coming from? Where's my rent money coming from and whatnot? Additionally, we do sometimes see vets who may not be 100% eligible. Let's say a vet is 90% eligible. So every semester, they're going to have a small part of their tuition not covered by the VA. In that case, veteran may need to take out a student loan. And in that case, we like to make sure that vets understand how to do so responsibly. What's the difference between a subsidized and unsubsidized loan, just so that, everything that we're doing to put ourselves in the most advantageous situation, financially and, educationally and whatnot. To the point about my second point about a specific part of FAFSA that pertains to veterans, the box is 44G, I believe, and it specifically asks about student untaxed income. This one used to trip me up a lot too when I was filling it out, but specifically when you look at, the regulations on it and what they want you to report all of the money that you get from the VA except education benefits. So if you're getting housing allowance from your GI Bill, you don't report that. If you're getting your tuition paid, which you are, you don't report that. However, a lot of veterans who are, using their benefits for their VA education benefits have VA disability. And that is something that you report because it is not a VA education benefit. It's, other compensation from the VA, and you would put that in this box. So yeah, that one really does trip a lot of people up. So essentially what it comes down to is you have to, on your FAFSA, report non-education benefits you get from the VA, but nothing you get as far as GI Bill or voc rehab bill.
If there was something that you wish that every veteran knew about education after their service, what would that be? And conversely, if you could make other students who are not veterans aware of something regarding, veterans on campus, what would that be?
So I guess the one thing I would tell the veterans who, haven't used education benefits yet is that to really realize that, we as a group have access to the greatest education benefits probably in the country. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of them and put yourself in position to obtain like a really strong and sustainable career. And don't be scared to reach out to, a school rep, the veteran rep at the school you want to go to, a Veterans Upward Bound, or anyone else, just, if you don't understand your benefits, because, someone will help you understand them, and they really are life-changing benefits. I can attest to, the power of them and what they can really do for you, your career, and, your family and all that. One more quick thing on that as well is I really just want to hammer home that your education benefits are unique. So don't just use post 9/11 because your buddy did. Research everything you're eligible for, research VR&E, kind of put them side by side and say, oh, well, this one will pay this way and this one will pay this way based on, how, where I go to school and, my rate of pursuit. So individualize it to you and make sure you're using the best benefit for your situation. And then the second question, can you repeat the second question? Was that
for other students?
And
yeah.
Yeah, I think with other students, it would be, just know that, veterans come from all different walks of life. And I could speak from experience being the student veteran in class. You may not even know you're sitting next to a veteran. I just think that, understand that all veterans have a different experience. Not everyone went through the same thing. Not everyone deployed. Some people stayed in the States the whole time. And understand that we all, come with these, I think, really valuable skills that, translate to any classroom situation.
Veterans Day is just around the corner. So, I hope you have a good Veterans Day, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. And again, I really enjoyed this.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, that was our show, everyone. Julie, thanks again.
Thank you.
Remember, if you like the show, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're hearing this. And if you could do us an extra favor and give us a 5-star rating, that would make us very happy indeed. Until next time, thanks a lot, everyone.